We all want to feel peace in our lives. Peace in our choices, our beliefs, our relationships, and our environment. I've learned that this desired contentment is often found through holding on to less. When we pare down what we own, what we consume, and what we value, we're left with what's intentional, a personalized curation of what is important and true and useful to us. I'm Shannon Leyko, and you're listening to Paring Down, a podcast aimed at helping you declutter not only your home, but any area of your life that's overwhelming. Here, we're having interesting and honest conversations about the physical and mental clutter that drowns out what truly matters to each of us. And together, we'll learn how to pare it all down, not for the sake of perfection or becoming rigid, rather so we can move through life with less overwhelm and more joy, wisdom, and peace. Welcome back to Paring Down, everyone. Okay, there are some episodes of this podcast that I just can hardly contain myself with excitement. I mean, I get really excited about any guest we have on because I wouldn't have them on if I didn't think they had something really valuable to say. But today's guest is one that I think is going to be like my top episode ever. I'm calling it now because so many of us struggle with how to help our parents declutter as they downsize near the end of life, or maybe you are experiencing that yourself. You've retired, you know that you need to downsize your possessions, and it can be a really, really challenging transition. I have wanted to have an episode like this for so long, and Jeannine Bryant, who is the queen of this, just showed up in my inbox and was like, I'll come on the podcast. And I was like, are you kidding me? This is the best news ever. So let me tell you a little bit about Jeannine before I share our incredible conversation with you, which I hope really, really helps any of you who are facing helping parents downsize their stuff or you're downsizing yourself in those later years of life. Jeannine Bryant is a senior move manager, not like she's senior in her role, which she is senior in her role, but she helps seniors move. Okay. So she's a senior move manager in Nebraska with over 15 years of experience in that field. She started something called Easy Rightsizing, which is a website and a platform that helps anyone from any area who's trying to right size or help their downsizing efforts in these later years. And maybe they don't have someone like a moving company like hers that literally helps them declutter and move the boxes and unpack the boxes. If you don't have that near you, maybe you can't afford it, she now has an entire platform that helps you do that with her different resources. In 2019, Jeannine began publishing books on the right-sizing process and educating older adults and their families about the right-sizing process. And that's all through her work at www.easyrightsizing.com. One of the coolest resources that she has coming out for 2025 is a right-sizing planner. It helps you figure out what rooms to tackle, what month at a time, really breaking it down and making the process a lot less overwhelming by walking you through how to do it. It's incredible. So all of those resources that she offers will be in the show notes, and you can get them all at www.easyrightsizing.com. And I know at the end is usually when I kind of share whatever the resources are that my guest has, but I did want to kind of shout out that planner because I think it's particularly exciting as we kick off the new year here in January that you might want to get your hands on that to help you or your parents throughout the rest of the year. But let's go ahead and get to the actual conversation with Jeannine, which I know you're dying to hear. So please enjoy this conversation with Jeannine Bryant of Easy Rightsizing. Jeannine, thank you so much for coming on. I just told you off air that you appeared in my inbox at the perfect time. But before I get too distracted, I just want to say hi and welcome to the Paring Down podcast.
Thank you. Hi, Shannon. I'm so happy to be here. I love talking about this stuff.
Oh, good. Okay. Well, great. Podcasts are a good place to talk about things you love.
Yep.
So this works out nicely. I was telling Jeannine, everyone, that so many of you have reached out and said, I'm struggling because my parents are downsizing. They need to declutter, but they're attached to their stuff. Or I've had seniors themselves reach out and say, I'm struggling with this. And so I knew I wanted to get a guest on to talk about it. And then Jeannine appeared in my inbox and was like, hey, I think that this would be a good fit for your podcast. And I was like, you think correctly. So Jeannine, would you please tell everyone a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Yes. So I am based in Lincoln, Nebraska, and I own a senior move management company here in my local area, and we are in our 16th year of business. And so what that means, senior move management, it means we help seniors who are downsizing and moving. And most of our clients are folks in their 70s, 80s, and 90s who are downsizing out of a large home they've been in for decades, right? 20, 30, 40 years. And they're moving either to a townhome or a retirement community. They're giving up half or more of their square footage, which means they've got to get rid of half or more of their stuff. And the business I own is a service-based business. So we go in and we help them sort. We help them make good decisions about what they're keeping and what they're not keeping. We do the packing. We do the unpacking in their new home. We get them all set up. We also are estate liquidators. So we run estate sales after they move, and we help them empty out their house. And I've been doing that. Like I said, this is the 16th year of that business. And I would often get phone calls from people outside of my geographic region saying, "Can you help my parents?" And unfortunately, I didn't have staff all over the country. And so that's when I decided to start my sister brand, which is called rightsizing.com. And I started writing books on the downsizing process and really sharing that the education and all of the stuff that I've learned over the last 16 years on how to downsize, and then exploring those ideas on how our stuff is so tied to us emotionally and why it's such a challenge to let go of things. I always say, if it was easy to let go of things, then I wouldn't have a job. So, people who are struggling with that are in good company. We all kind of struggle with that. So at Easy Right Sizing, I try to provide lots of education, practical tips. I'm all about practical tips, inspiration, and information so that people can really start that process and go through it on their own. And then also lots of resources if they want to hire help. Chances are there's someone in your area who can help you with this because it's a really growing industry.
Well, I was going to say, I had never heard of a senior move management company until now. And I was thinking, this is a gold mine.
Yeah.
Like, I think that pretty much everyone wants this, whether it's for themselves or their parents at some point in life. So, I mean, this is amazing. And not only that you do that hands-on work with your team, but that you've been able to create this website and these books and this offering to help people who maybe can't afford to hire someone or don't have these kind of services near them. So
Yes.
I'm just highly impressed by this and excited by it. So how did you personally get into this field of senior move management?
So I didn't start my senior move management business. My former business partner started it with her sister after they moved their parents out of a big farmhouse and downsized them into town. But I grew up always loving organization. That was a gift that the good Lord gave me. Organization, that's my jam. I love it. Decluttering. And I also grew up surrounded by old people. And I use that term affectionately. That's not a bad word in my book. I grew up a mile from one set of grandparents and a mile and a half from the other set of grandparents. And so everyone was always over at our house for all of the family functions. I had a great aunt and uncle who didn't have any children. They were over. We had a couple random bachelor old men who didn't have family. They came over. So there was always elderly folks in my home. And I just became very comfortable with them. I grew up in rural North Dakota. And so I always had a special place in my heart for working with seniors. And when I met my former business partner and I saw what she was doing, combining organizing with seniors, I thought, oh, this is for me. I knew it. And so but back in 2010, I bought into the company and was a part owner of the company. And then she retired in 2014 and moved out of state. She's actually my dad's age. So she was older when she started this business. Because so often this kind of work, let's face it, it falls to the adult daughters of the family or sometimes the daughters-in-law, because of course, this isn't new work that needs to be done, but this has been unpaid women's work for generations, right? And just recently, I've started charging for it, right? Because there's a professional organizer, Sue DeRoos. She has this great quote, and she says, "We all get organized eventually. We just might not be around for it." And that's true, right? In one of my books, Keep the Memories, Not the Stuff, I write that we're all going to die someday, and our stuff has to go somewhere. And so forever, we've been emptying out homes when our loved ones die and distributing their goods. But that problem has just kind of exploded in the last couple generations because the amount of stuff has exploded that we own and our houses have gotten bigger. But now these women who were doing all of this unpaid labor are busy. They have jobs of their own. And families are not always right in that area. Sometimes they're in other states. And so they need to hire help to help their folks through this process.
Man, all of that, it took everything in my power not to interrupt you with so many like amens. Yes, that I mean, because it's so true. There's so much cultural backstory that goes into this, right? There's so many things that might have to do with gender, with how we are not living in proximity to our parents as often anymore, with all of those things that with obviously with the consumption that has just absolutely skyrocketed. I think I read a stat that I mean, I shouldn't even say it because that's going to be wrong because I don't remember it. But we've basically like tripled our consumption even since 2018.
Oh my gosh. I
Like,
know
I
it's
mean,
because of Amazon. I mean,
right,
yeah.
right. And then in COVID, and then so many people now working at home and being at home more often, and the consumption has just skyrocketed even more when we thought it couldn't get any worse. Gosh, in 2018. So anyway, there are so many things converging to
Mhm.
create such a problem that so many seniors and their families are facing. And like you said, especially the women. And this is not to say we're anti men. I always say that because oftentimes these gender roles do come up in these conversations
Yep.
about decluttering
Mhm.
simply because of the undeniable fact and history of what women have been expected to do in the home, and then how that has shifted and made life even more difficult for women who now are supposed to be able to do it all, right?
Yeah.
And from any location. Like, how am
Yeah.
I supposed to help my parents
Oh
downsize?
yeah.
I live in Florida. They live in Virginia. Like, I'm
I'll
supposed
just
to
fly
fly
up
out there?
every weekend for 6 weeks. Yeah.
But there is some weird expectation that that's the
Yeah.
case. Like, you fly in and you do it in a weekend. Like, this is insane. So, thank you for bringing up that background. I think that is really important to acknowledge, especially for maybe the kids and seniors themselves listening who might think, oh, is there a sense of weakness, or am I not loving if I
Oh,
need help?
no.
Absolutely not. We're living in completely different times that
Yes.
require this sort of help, or at least a lot more intentionality. So there seems to be a pattern that seniors, particularly the eldest of the seniors, probably your clients, right? Because my parents are seniors. They're in their 60s, their late
Okay.
60s.
Yep.
And I would say that for them at this point, I haven't seen a tremendous attachment to their stuff, but they're also not quite downsizing yet. You know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
they're not quite getting out of that house to downsize, because physically in their 60s, they can still probably get away with taking care of this home.
Yep.
So when we look to maybe the 70s, 80s, and 90s, like you see, when they start to recognize they cannot take care of this big home and all this stuff on their own anymore,
Mhm.
we see though that age group seems to be the most attached to their stuff.
Mhm.
They might recognize that they need to get rid of it, but then they like have this mental block. So in your experience, why do you think that is?
I think that for most seniors, and this is totally natural, one of their biggest fears is losing control and autonomy over their life. Right? Of course, we're all going to feel that way, and as a senior, they're getting closer to that being their reality. And unfortunately, the longer someone waits to downsize, the more likely it is that they will lose their autonomy and control over what happens to their stuff. And so I do think it's that attachment is an attempt to, hold on to control of their life, which is again a completely understandable reaction to the very difficult process that is aging, right? I mean, you and I were still young, vibrant women, but I mean, from what I've been told by my clients over the last 16 years is that aging is not for suckers and it's not for wusses, right? And it's hard. But my message is that, life at all stages, but particularly in the last quarter of your life, it is a challenge. Let's not let our stuff be one of those things that's making it even harder, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it goes back to that idea that we're all going to get organized eventually. Either we're going to do it or the people we leave behind will do it. And the longer we wait, the fewer options we have. A lot of my younger clients who are maybe in their early 70s who are choosing to downsize, they're doing it because they actually want more freedom. They want to be able to travel without worrying about who's taking care of the lawn and who's checking in on the house, or they want just the ability to go and see their family all over the country. They don't want to spend. I just visited with a gal earlier this week who said, I'm moving so that I don't have to take care of this house, and if I just want to sit all day and sew, I can. It's like, great. um
Yes.
so yeah, I mean, I think that attachment, it's based in fear, which is completely understandable and not something to look. I mean, it's something that we will probably all face at some point.
Right. I was reading a book. I want to say it might have been the Gentle Art of Swedish Death Cleaning, but it
Yes.
might have not been that book. It might have been something
Yeah.
else. But I read a study, or at least a observance, that the happiest cultures in the world tend to be the ones that are willing to talk about death and face death. And that can feel counterintuitive, right? Because death
Mhm.
feels really hard and full of grief and full of the unknown. So if you're facing it yourself, maybe in old age, then that's very scary. If you're thinking about it in terms of your parents, obviously it feels devastating. And so we don't think about it. And I think that that's a reflection then in the amount of stuff that we own and that we hold on to, because it's a matter of avoiding what we see as a really tough topic. But
Yeah.
ironically, when we do face death head on and know that it's coming, we all know that, but like when we allow ourselves to say it out loud, to
Right.
acknowledge it, not only does that give us greater strength in this decluttering journey and this downsizing journey, but it also gives us a sense of freedom, because as with anything, the more we keep it inside and let it fester, the scarier things become, like the bigger they become. But by saying out loud, and obviously I'm 36, I'm saying this not as someone who's going through it. So I
Mhm.
can't say that I understand the struggle of acknowledging it as in old age. I mean, obviously I could die tomorrow too, but
Mhm.
I recognize it's probably a harder thing to face the
Mhm.
closer it comes to you. However, I do think that it's ironic that we try and hold it in, when in reality, if we just say it out loud, if we acknowledge it, if we say, I need to do this, the time is coming, that it gives us the freedom and control and the happiness that we're looking for, the peace that we're looking for, by clinging on so tightly, is actually found when we can let go a little bit and be
Yeah.
realistic. And like you said, they want to be able to have control over where their things go, which is why they hold on to them.
Mhm.
But they get that freedom to choose the younger they do
Yes.
this, right?
Yes.
And it's
Yep.
like it's hard to wrap your head around that, but it does
Yep.
make a lot of sense to me.
Okay, I don't know if you have kids, Shannon, but it's
I
kind
do.
of like they tell parents to talk about, your bodies and sex and puberty. They say talk about it early and often with your kids. Like before, if you wait until they're 13 to bring up the subject, it's like, oh my gosh, this is so embarrassing. I think talking about death is the same way. If you talk about it early and often, before, maybe decades before it's actually going to come, it's not a sad conversation. If your
Right.
mother at 67 years old is saying, well, your dad and I are thinking about the things we'd like to pass on to you, that's not going to be a sad conversation, because you're like, Mom, you're going to be around for 20 more years. But if you wait until there's a stage 4 cancer diagnosis, now suddenly that's a sad conversation, right? And same thing when it goes to going through your stuff or distributing your keepsakes to the thing, giving your things away that you're hoping that your family will take after you're gone. I always encourage my clients to give those keepsakes away as gifts. If we're coming up to the holiday season, that's the perfect time to wrap those things up as gifts, give them away, so that while you're still alive, so that you can tell them, hey, this was your great grandmother's vase. It came over on the boat from Norway, and I'm so happy to be here to give it to you. Now that's a happy memory, instead of going over to grandma's house after the funeral when we're cleaning it out and picking out a keepsake. That's a sad memory, right? And so
Mm.
if we talk about this stuff earlier, it can have a much more positive impact on ourselves and our lives, and just emotionally, it's more healthy.
This all does bring up when I was reading The Gentle Art of Swedish Death Cleaning, because I remember in there, she had mentioned Margaret Magnuson is the name of the
Uh-huh.
author for anyone
Yep.
interested. I will link this in the show notes too. But I do remember her saying how there's this idea for seniors that you're going to give away the things you want to pass down as though there's nothing you can keep just for you. And she had this idea of keeping maybe a small tub that you label, just get rid of this when I die. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like, this was just for me. Don't try and like make a thing out of it or make it more important than it was. Like this tub of stuff made me happy, but
Right.
like
Right.
you don't have to keep it. And I thought, what a great idea to label something so that your
Mhm.
family, like I remember going to my aunt's garage that had all my grandma and grandpa stuff laid out in it, and all the cousins were in there trying to decide who keeps what and what pictures are actually important. We don't know who half the people in the pictures are, all this stuff, right? And if they had just labeled it and said like, hey, don't worry, these were our friends like back in the 40s, but
Yes.
like you don't need to keep it. Right?
Yes.
That would have made our life so much easier.
Yes. I always say, if you confront your possessions in later life, you're the one who knows what's important and what's not. And whereas if you don't go through it and pass down these keepsakes after you're gone, your adult children or grandchildren aren't going to know the difference between the vase you got at an estate sale last year and the vase your great grandmother gave you. And so you've got to go through that and pare down. My message is always keep the best and let go of the rest. And I love that idea of the Swedish art of death cleaning, because I think really everyone at age 75 should start that process. I mean, none
Mhm.
of us know, like you said, none of us have a crystal ball. We don't know how long we're going to live, but at 75, I think it's time to confront your possessions and start letting things go, and giving things away.
And in some ways, I can imagine that it might be a fun process. You get to
Oh,
uncover memories you
yeah.
haven't thought of in such a long time. You get excited thinking, oh, who would I like to give this to?
Yes.
You start to feel a sense of empowerment, right? I think
Mhm.
that from what I've been told or observed, again, not speaking from firsthand experience, but is that you start to lose this sense of power and control, even like we'd said.
Mhm.
And this gives you, hey, you have a reason to wake up and get to work, because this is a reflection of your love for your kids, because you don't want them to have to go through it, right? And so you're doing something
100%.
for your family. You're still serving your family, just in a different way than maybe you did before. And I think that's beautiful. My in-laws have done an outrageously incredible job decluttering. They're in their 70s. And they said they realized in retirement a couple years ago, oh, well, we don't want you guys to go through the basement.
Right.
And
Right.
she's had so much fun doing it. My in-law, I could just see my mother-in-law. She's just like brighter and happier about it. And she wants to show us the spaces. Oh my gosh, look at the basement. And now she's created a little play area in the basement for her grandkids, which she didn't have room for before. And so now she's been able to serve her family by all this hard work and the satisfaction.
Yes. And now in her house, living is going on, not just storing, right? Because your house is living space, it's not storing space. Absolutely. And her adult children maybe don't appreciate enough how much of a gift she's giving to them. But anyone who's had to clean out their parents' house and has been burdened by that knows that, boy, that is having to clean out that house on top of mourning the loss of your parent. So often people say, I don't want to do that to my kids. And so then they do get proactive about their own stuff. So make sure that your husband and his siblings are thanking their parents for doing that, because that's a big gift she's giving them.
Yeah. So, Jeannine, my mom actually passed away when I was 24. And
Mine too.
interesting. Oh, when you were 24?
Yes.
Gosh, I'm so sorry.
Wow. Okay,
Yeah.
Shannon. The universe has brought us together.
Yes. And an unfortunate club, but also in so many ways, and I hope that you have found this too. I can never go back and regret anything in life, right? Because I'm so
Mhm.
grateful for my life today. And I don't know if I'd have the husband and the kids I have should my mom have been alive, right? Like you can't ever regret. And then the lessons you learn from the grief are so powerful. So of course I wish my mom was here, but also I'm so grateful for the lessons I learned during that time. And my mom was not a stuff person. I've said this on the podcast and shared about this. I did an episode about sentimental items and what it was like to go through her things. And she didn't have that much. And I think that, opposite of maybe people who we land in the same place, but people who have to go through a ton of stuff with their parents, they're like, I'm not doing that to my kids. But because I didn't have to go through a ton of stuff, I was like, this is how I want to offer my kids, right? Like this was the way
What
to
a good
do it. And
example. Yeah.
what a great example. And I knew that like I didn't have any guilt getting rid of all her clothes, because even throughout life, my mom was like, clothes don't matter, things don't matter. Like, let's go take the kayak out in the back pond or the back, lake. And like, that's what matters, is making memories and getting outside and getting in the sun. You know what I mean? So my mom, I knew she would be mad at me if I tried to keep too many of her clothes. So that made it easier too. So like being able to have this like, these conversations about what truly matters. And I think that nobody sees that more clearly than seniors. I mean, we can look
Yeah.
at Bonnie
Yeah.
Bonnie Ray, no, that's a singer. Bonnie something. I will link it in the show notes. But she wrote that famous blog post, The Regrets of the Dying. And the majority of them were pursuing stuff, pursuing money, pursuing things that just didn't matter instead of spending time with the loved ones. And so seniors, if you're listening, I have a feeling that you feel that and you know that more than anyone, because you can look back on life, whether you have regrets or not, and say, did I pursue the right things? And if you have those conversations with your kids now, then they won't feel bad if they do have to go through some of your stuff when it's your time.
Right. I always say, so my second book was all about that. It's called Keep the Memories, Not the Stuff. And I always say that the first step in releasing some of that stuff, because we have our own keepsakes that we keep, right? Like our wedding dress or, whatever, the scrapbooks that, we made as a kid. But then I think the hardest keepsakes are the keepsakes we inherit from those who we've lost, right?
Yes.
Those who have passed away. And those are the things that I think so often people feel they hold on to that stuff because of the guilt and the fear. They feel guilty if they let go of this stuff. Oh, my mom loved these Hummel figurines. I can't let go of them. They were her pride and joy. My brother just called me, and it's crazy, Shannon, that you were also 24 when you lost your mom. But just yesterday, my brother called me, getting rid of mom's china cabinet. And
Mm,
that china cabinet was like her pride and joy. But it's like, from the 70s. It's not like an antique. And because I'm in the reseller business, I know that it's not worth anything. Okay, financially, I don't want it. My brother doesn't want it. And I just said, our dear mother is turning over in her grave, but I think you can, get rid of it. But if letting go of those things becomes so much easier when you really internalize this idea that stuff and love and memories are not the same thing. Those are three separate things. And the amount of stuff you keep from a loved one is in no way reflected on how much you loved that person, how much you will miss that person, or how much you will remember that person. Those things are completely separate. And I think the fear, when we're not really cognizant of it, we're attaching those things together, and that's why it's hard to let go of those things. But because intellectually we know that, we gotta understand that in our hearts, and then releasing some of that stuff that doesn't bring joy to us when we see it becomes a lot easier. I'm not saying don't keep any keepsakes, because again, we want you to keep the best and let go of the rest. But it should be a curated collection of things from your loved one that you are keeping. And the point of keepsakes is to make us happy. If the keepsakes you're keeping from a loved one are weighing you down, if they're stressing you out, if God forbid they're in a storage unit across town, those things are not making you happy. And so I always recommend to keep keepsakes that you can either use or display. So I have like a pair of my mom's leather gloves that I still use in the winter. Okay. I'm using those. It makes me happy. I think of her when I wear them. Or I have things that I can display on the wall, a piece of furniture that belonged to her, whatever, because then they become part of my life, right? Which now they're become a part of my kids' lives. My mother never met my children, but now, I mean, at least some of her things are around our house, and I can say to my kids, like, "Oh, that belonged to my mom," and then we start talking about her. So, but those things don't happen if it's stored away in a box in the basement or in the attic.
oh, yes. I think I shared this on a recent episode, but I got my mom's Bible recently. My stepdad sent it to me, and I think he's doing some of downsizing of his own.
Yep. Yep.
And it was the best gift of all time. And it's been so fun. My kids ask about it. I'm like, oh, this was Grandma in Heaven's Bible, and like, this is why it was so important. And this is what I remember about how she would read every morning on the porch. And, it's so I got this little acrylic case for it. And so I literally have it hanging on the wall. And it's just, oh gosh, it brings me so much joy.
That's awesome.
Okay, this conversation is seriously one of my favorites I've ever had, because I just appreciate how gentle and thoughtful you are, both for the seniors themselves as well as family members. And
Yeah.
there's just so much to be said here.
Mhm.
But let's dive into maybe some practical strategies. So, what are some of your best pieces of advice for seniors or families of seniors who are looking to start the process of right sizing?
Mhm. Well, you how to eat an elephant one bite at a time. And so if you've lived in your home for 40 years, do not start 2 weeks before the moving truck shows up. It's not going to happen. Okay. And that's another reason to start early, right? Because we don't want to wait until there's an injury or a diagnosis and the doctor says you can't go home. You have to move to a retirement community. So now other people are making those decisions. So eating an elephant one bite at a time, when it comes to downsizing and decluttering, for me, that means taking it one room at a time, one closet, one shelf, one drawer at a time. If it's overwhelming, and see now That's it. Decluttering is like the most fun thing I can imagine doing. I love doing it. And so that's not a problem for me. If it's not the most fun thing you can imagine doing, then set a timer. Set a timer for 10 minutes, for 20 minutes. Every day, you can really make a lot of progress. That's what, 140 minutes a week. Okay. And I actually created last year and this next year for 2025 a downsizing calendar planner that gives you prompts to focus on one room in your house per month, because it's that power of focus that helps you really achieve results, right? Like with anything in life, if you're trying to do 10 different things, you're not going to see a lot of progress. If you're trying to do one thing, you can actually make some progress. So for instance, in the month of January, it's the kitchen, and I encourage my readers to spend that entire month just in the kitchen. Don't go anywhere else. Okay. Go through every cupboard, every drawer, every shelf, and look at what you've got. First of all, a lot of people don't even know what they have in their house. So kind of just take an inventory, put eyeballs on it, and then pull out anything you're not using or you don't love or you don't need. Because here's the thing, there are people in your community who would love that item or who could use that item. And it is wasteful, yes, wasteful, to keep those items unused in your home. So many people say, oh, I don't want to waste, I got to keep it. Yeah, if you're not using it in your home, that's wasteful. So get it out into the hands of someone else in your community who can put it to use. You can only do that by going through systematically each room of your house, make those piles of stuff you're ready to get rid of. And then here's the trick. You actually have to do something with those piles, which means you put it in the car and you drive it over to the donation place and you get it out of your house. Now it's back into circulation and other people can use it. You can also give things to family and friends. The holidays are a great time to gift those items. I love giving things away for free on those. There's so many free Facebook groups and buy nothing Facebook groups. That's a perfect way to rehome some of your stuff. Your excess can be someone else, can be a blessing to someone else.
Totally. Yes. And I will make sure all the resources that you were mentioning will be in the show notes, just so everyone knows too, your books, all of that. I'll have you do a little bit of an overview of those at the end
Sure.
of what you have. But that will all be available for you. I also have an episode of the podcast. It's called Leaning into the Season of Giving. And I'll have that in the show notes. And that, I walk you through lots of options of what you can do with all your stuff to get them out of your house, like practical ways to actually get it out the door. So that's a good episode. Hey guys, it's time for your ad break. Each week I like to say a huge thank you for your graciousness that these are part of the podcast. Here we go. All right, I want to spend the second half of our conversation here talking about probably the most complicated part of what you do, which is kind of the relational dynamics and how kids navigate this when their parents are very resistant. This is probably one of the top 3, maybe top 2 concerns or difficulties I see coming up in my community is, I had one follower DM me and she was like, listen, my dad is moving in with us. We are building this brand new house. She has younger kids and we're building this brand new house and we have an area for him to live in, like an in-law suite, but he's insisting that he's bringing all of his stuff and we don't know how to say no because we don't want him to think that he's not welcome. So now I feel like our brand new home is going to be covered in my dad's stuff instead of us being able to enjoy this new house that we're building. And I was like, but I also didn't know exactly what to say. I said, wait till this episode comes out with Jeannine Bryant because I'm going to ask her this question because it's so complicated because the parents, especially in older age, I've noticed can feel there's a lot of anger when their child tries to help them downsize. So what would you suggest to someone in that follower's shoes?
Yeah, that is a hard situation. And I do have a lot of compassion for that person because everyone's personality is different, right? And I have, my father is, he's got I wouldn't say challenging personality. He's a strong personality, right? You're not going to tell my dad to do anything. I'm also not inviting him to live in my house with me, but I would maybe read this book, Boundaries. Have you heard of that book, Boundaries? You Google it. And it's about setting personal boundaries for yourself. Because I wonder if this listener has those challenges in other areas of her life, maybe not just with her father, but with coworkers or whatever. If you and your husband are building this home, It's so I love this work because every family is different and family dynamics are so interesting, and I learn so much about myself and my family when I see other people's families. But there comes a time in every family's life when the children really become adults. Those adult children become adults, even in the eyes of their parents. And sometimes that happens at a young age, and sometimes that doesn't happen until the adult child is 65 and the dad's 90, right? There comes a time when the children get to make those decisions, and it's no longer the parent making all of those decisions. So if this reader or this listener is building this home with her husband, theoretically paying for it, and I don't know what the financial implications of that. If he's footing 50% of the bill, maybe he gets to fill up 50% of the house. But when we're helping someone downsize, the first thing we always start with is a floor plan. We got to figure out the furniture first. So I would recommend taking out that measuring tape, getting a floor plan of his space in the new house, measuring all the furniture he wants to take, okay, all 53 pieces of furniture he thinks he wants to take. And then we always make little paper cutouts, and then we sit down with our clients, and then we really kind of play paper dolls, and we figure out what's going to fit where. And for our clients, lots of times seeing that on a piece of paper, okay, logistically, this is not all going to fit. You can't put 10 pounds of flour in a 5-pound sack, right? That's kind of an old person saying, but they understand that when you say that. And so once you figure out what furniture will fit in his space, then you can start sorting through the little stuff and figuring out what he's got room for as far as the little stuff goes. Because now with all the tchotchkes, we can visualize how many flat surfaces he's got to display tchotchkes. We can visualize the wall space he's going to have for his art. We're going to know how big that closet is for when it comes to his clothing that he's bringing. If he's got a collection of some kind, once you have the floor plan, you can really ask him, okay, where is this collection going to go? Is it going to go in a bunch of boxes and then we're not going to have room to unpack it? Because if that's the case, then let me help you figure out a nearby storage unit where you can put those boxes. Right. And then do the same thing. I would recommend for this listener to do the same thing with her stuff too. Make a floor plan for their part of the house and figure out where their furniture is going to go, so that it's not, you can't put 10 pounds of flour in a 5-pound sack, but if you're not measuring how much flour you've got, you don't really know. You're just kind of crossing your fingers and hoping it's all going to fit. If you go into it with a plan, then you can have intelligent conversations that are based in logic, and there's an actual piece of paper in front of you showing everyone in the room what there's going to be room for and what there's not.
Right. So it's kind of like the papers delivering the bad news rather than
Yeah.
you.
Yes,
Yeah, I think that's
exactly.
brilliant.
Yeah.
That's brilliant.
Mm-hmm.
And it makes so much sense. Like you said, it's very logical. And
Mm-hmm.
that's the thing. And part of why I love your approach is there's so much respect. I think sometimes adult children or just younger adults begin to lose the necessary respect that we owe the elderly community. They
Mm-hmm.
are not stupid.
No,
They are not
they have
unreasonable.
more experience than
That's
we do.
They have more experience than we do. They are potentially, when they're crossing boundaries or they're attached to things or whatever, they're hurting, right? They're
Mm-hmm.
scared.
Mm-hmm.
They feel unseen. Gosh,
Mm-hmm.
I'm 36 and I already, obviously, it's a completely different experience walking into a room at the age 36 than when I was a hot little 22-year-old in a size 2 body. You know what I mean? Like, especially as women, but just in general, we begin to feel more invisible the older we get. So I just imagine someone in their 80s and
Yeah.
they're like, am I going to be completely erased when all my stuff is gone? Then what is left? Because I'm hardly acknowledged as being able to offer anything, right? They're just old. They just say senile, silly old
Right.
things. Everything they do seems to be dismissed.
Mm-hmm.
And so, of course, that's going to manifest into clinging onto the things that make them feel like they still matter. And so it is very important to offer this logical approach rather than you're being unreasonable. We can't fit all this stuff in the house. Can't you see it? You don't even see it. Like, how, and then you start thinking, oh, they're just unreasonable old people. But to sit down with a piece of paper, it shows them and you that they can see things
Mm-hmm.
logically
Yep.
and have this a much calmer, less emotionally driven conversation and practically driven conversation.
Yes.
That is really, really great.
I would just say for anyone who has parents who are really resistant to that idea of downsizing, you can start with that low hanging fruit, right? I mean, Peter Walsh, organizer Peter Walsh, he talks
Yep.
about the 2 minute trash bag tango or something, where you take a trash bag for 2 minutes and you walk around your house and you try to fill it with trash. For the low hanging fruit, it might mean starting in the bathroom. Let's go through the linen closet and go through all your old towels. And like another tip I always give is to utilize the power of counting. I call it like counting. Mom, how many bath towels do we have in here? Oh, 13 bath towels. Okay, it's just you and dad in the house. You do laundry once a week. Maybe, 5 towels per person is plenty, or 2 sets of sheets per bed is plenty. Starting in the linen closet, going through the old medicine cabinet in your bathroom, that might be a low stakes place to start. Don't start with like, the photos. The photos,
Right.
that's the hardest. And I think that's what Marie Kondo says too. She's like, you kind of go up, you go through these stages, start with the easiest stuff, then go to the hardest stuff.
Right. I mean, that's what we do with ourselves. That's what I encourage anyone who's decluttering to do, no matter what your age. But I think it's important to remember that if we want to, quote, help our parents downsize, we can't just say to them, you need to get rid of all this stuff that you've
Yeah.
had forever. Like, to help them get specific is so important. If you feel overwhelmed by their stuff, they feel overwhelmed by their stuff. And the most helpful thing we can do is not just to say, just get rid of it. Well, what does that mean? What does that mean to you when you look around your house and just get rid of it? You don't know where to start yourself. How would they?
And you might find a lot of success if you say to your parents, mom or dad, next Saturday afternoon, I've got a free. Can I come over and help you go through this? Because that might be the greatest gift of all, right? They probably really just want some time with you instead of you barking at them. You should do this. Mom, I've got next afternoon free. I'd love to come over and help you. And then you are there. Hopefully, it can be a fun interaction, right? But then also, you're there logistically and physically to do some of the work and say, you know what, I'll schlep that stuff to Goodwill for you. Or, hey, I'm going to bring over some cardboard boxes, or I've got trash bags. So just doing the most you can to make it as easy as possible for them.
Yes, yes, I love that. One of the things that I know you encourage to help in this process is to help seniors foster a sense of resilience during this very big transition. They're moving. It is a direct reflection, usually, of a changing life and body and all of that. And so, to find resilience and happiness in this new stage of life
Mhm.
often helps letting go some of the things that reflect their older, they're not older, but their previous
Yeah.
life.
Hmm.
So, what are some things we can do to help our parents or that seniors can do to help themselves foster resilience during this transition?
Yeah. I mean, they're in that if they are going through that downsizing process, they're in this place called liminal space, right? It's that in between space. They're no longer back here and they haven't yet arrived to their next chapter. And so if they're downsizing out of a home they've been in for decades, this is a huge transition, right? It's just as big as when they got married and moved in with their spouse for the first time, or if they left home and went away to college, or left home and went away to boot camp. We've all been through these big transitions in our lives, and the one at the end of at the end of their life when they're downsizing is no different, and it's even heavier because everyone in the room knows this might be the last move, right? Depending on when they move, but yeah, I mean, and that's not a secret, and so it's okay to talk about that. I guess just I'm a proponent of just talking about that with compassion and not being afraid to say like, yeah, this is hard, and
Mhm.
most of my clients are downsizing to a townhome or independent living, and they're doing it proactively. And I always say those are kind of happy moves because they're choosing that. No one wants to move to assisted living, right? When you get to a point where you need assisted living, it means you need help with the activities of your daily living. So it means you need help getting dressed or taking a shower, going to the toilet, getting your medication, getting your food. You need assistance for that. And so by that point, their health has declined enough that they're going to assisted living. No one wants to do that. The only reason someone does go to assisted living is because life has gotten so hard on their own, trying to do it without help, that that is a better alternative, right? And it's okay to say that. It's okay to say this sucks. I'm sorry. But to also to remember that they have so much more experience than we have, and they've been through, they're talking now about what a weak generation we are because life has been so good for so long for many of us. Our parents have lived through probably much harder times than we have, and to kind of remind them of that, and to remind them of the strength that they have and the things that they've lived through, and to know that they're still setting an example for you. I'm still watching you, mom and dad, as you're navigating this. And thank you for being a good role model for me, right? Or to think about maybe even you can remember past generations. Remember when mom or when grandma and grandpa had to go to the nursing home and how hard that was. I mean, just talking and relating through it, I think helps with that resiliency and not being afraid to put it out there and say the hard thing that's really happening that everyone's thinking, and maybe it's hard to say out loud.
Totally. I mean, the only way to move forward, which is what resiliency is, right, is that you still there's forward movement, you get back up, you get back on the horse kind of a thing, is to acknowledge that you fell off in the first place or
Right.
that it's hard to begin with, right?
Yeah.
And so I think talking about it is just a great piece of advice.
Mhm.
And I guess my last question, it kind of plays into this, but how can we make the process feel happier and more positive?
Yeah. That's so important to make it a positive thing. I think encouraging family involvement is good because for so many seniors, that really is what they want from us. They want time with their family, time with their kids, time with their grandkids, doing silly things like bringing donuts over in the morning, right? Reminding them to take breaks, to go slow, play some music while you're going through, take the time to ask questions and listen to stories, even if they're stories that you've heard many times before. You might want to grab your smartphone while they're telling you that story and say, mom, I'm going to record you. And she might say, oh no, my hair looks terrible or whatever, but say, mom, this isn't for you and it's not for me, it's for my kids or my grandkids. They're going to see this video and they're going to, I mean, how many of us have grandparents or great grandparents who we've lost? What we wouldn't give to have a video of them, to hear their voice again, to just like see their facial expressions. So honoring them, by even taking a video of them when they're telling you those stories, can really help them feel valued, and it just kind of makes everything on a more positive note. And it kind of, because I get it, okay, adult children, we are busy, we're stressed, quite frankly we would rather be doing something else, okay, but it kind of, when you do those things, when you ask questions, make yourself slow down and listen, it gets you back into that place for your best self, where you should be, right? Where you are being respectful and honoring your parents. And sometimes we all get too busy, and it's the cats in the cradle and the silver spoon, right? It's that story. Everyone goes through that, but it kind of gets you back to that place of being the kind of adult child that you want to be, right?
Yes, I really love what you said too about how we can thank them for their example. They're still teaching us. I think a lot
Totally.
of times, I mean, I'm in the throes of young parenthood, right? I have how old are my kids? Three, almost 5, almost 7. They're both born on
Okay.
Christmas Eve.
Yes.
So we're recording this early December. This will come out in January. But
Okay.
so basically 3, 5, and 7, right? So it's obvious that I am parenting my children. I'm like, please look both ways before you cross the road. Like, it's very clear. I'm trying to set an example in how I, solve arguments and repair. And like my parenting right now is like 100%. It's full throttle.
Hmm.
And I think that as parents, it would feel so good to know that even when my kids are 65,
Hmm.
that they're still looking to me. I'm still
Yeah.
parenting them.
Yeah.
Like you said, showing an example of how to move through life, hopefully the best way you possibly can. And that includes in this transition at near the end of life too. And so I think that that's a joyous thing that would probably bring a lot of happiness to parents in the process, is to get a thank you for showing me that you're working so hard to do this, even though it's hard, because it's teaching me how to be able to do this as well. That's a beautiful thing. And something else that you kind of mentioned in the email that I'll just kind of share here at the end, because I just thought it was really great, is that encouraging a sense of independence outside the home, like not even the decluttering thing, but like helping our parents know that they can get out there and live. You can go to the library and
Mhm.
find, really great community with other people. I love going to the library at my age, like right now.
Yes.
It's
And
my
it's
favorite
great for the
place.
kids too. Yes.
Yes.
Yep.
But it's
I
also
remember.
great. I love seeing like they have a knitting club and
Yep.
they come on like Thursdays, and it just brings me so much happiness. And just whether they can still play pickleball if they're that, able to
Mhm.
move, or they maybe can't move very well, but like they can get to the library for a knitting club or
Yep.
whatever it is, encouraging them to have a life
Yeah.
outside of the home
Mhm. And
helps them then not feel so attached to the things that, because they're still living. They're still
right,
living. They're not holding on
exactly.
to the past. It's not just clutches on the stuff because I only have this for my life. You
Right.
still have the life that you have right now.
Exactly. And being intentional about that. And I think one of the biggest challenges of this term aging in place, which can mean a lot of things. But if that means for someone like, you're gonna carry me out of here on a gurney, right? Like I'm staying here no matter what. But one of the dangers of that is the isolation, social isolation, as seniors get older and older. And when they're entering their late 80s or 90s, now suddenly their friendships, they've outlived a lot of their friends, and so it gets even worse, right? But even when folks retire, right, that sense of isolation is really prevalent among seniors, and then now that starts degrading their mental health. And so to be proactive about right sizing not only your things but your activities and your social circle as well. When a lot of my clients are moving into these independent retirement communities, their social interaction goes up 300%, right? And even if it's just seeing people in the hallways as you're getting your mail or seeing people at meals, or if they're really going all in and participating in the activities, that is so key. And I mean, if you research healthy aging, that's the number one thing is your relationships. And when we're so focused on our stuff, I've worked with a handful of hoarders throughout the years. Invariably, people who are hoarders do not have healthy relationships in their life. I mean, it's um, an oxymoron. You can't have both at the same time, really. And so,
Mm.
to really foster those relationships and those activities and your sense of independence and your sense of purpose in retirement, I think is a unique challenge that I do think this generation of baby boomers is going to really take on. I think they're being pretty intentional about it, which is really inspiring for me as I think about that, my retirement years.
Ah, yes. Gosh, that's such a good point. And what a great way to also find positivity in a transition if you're moving into a place that you're going to be around other seniors.
Mhm.
That's a great thing to focus on. Be like, yes, I got to have some built in friends. That's awesome. And it
Yes.
reminds me, too, I think of this social isolation can often really start in motherhood because
Oh,
you're so
yeah.
busy with the kids. How do I have time for friends? You know what I mean? And then that builds decade after decade after decade. And how many of us look at our parents and be like, yeah, they don't really have any friends, right? Because after so many decades of serving their kids and loving on their kids, and then their kids fly the coop and they're like, where are my friends? It's like, it's hard. So to continue those friendships and to prioritize those friendships, no matter how old you are, I think this goes to show the importance of that. I was talking to my husband just last night, like, hey, I think I'm gonna sneak away at bedtime this week to go see Wicked with two of my girlfriends,
Mhm.
and he's so supportive of that. He's like, good, be gone, go leave early and get a drink before you go, like,
Mhm.
and I appreciate that because it can feel hard. I can feel guilty. I'm not gonna be there for bedtime. I can feel guilty because now my husband has to deal with our three chaos balls at bedtime, like,
Right.
but to say, no, 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 like these women, whether they're my friends when we're 80 or not, just
Mhm.
the practice of making sure that I'm with them is going to be huge my whole life.
Yeah, and that you're a whole person. You are
Mhm.
so right, Shannon. I mean, for women, that is hard in young motherhood and get and when the kids fly the coop and you look around and you realize your only real friendships now were like with the other soccer parents. Well, now that you're not going to soccer games every weekend, where are the soccer parents? You never see them again. And I think that happens so much to women, especially. But I think men struggle with relationships throughout their whole life, right? Women are more
Absolutely.
social, but I do think that we need to be careful to not tie all of our socialness to one chapter of our life, because when that chapter ends, it can be a challenge. So I am right there with you, girl. It's hard to get away for those girls' weekends or even happy hour because we're all exhausted. We've all got different kids with different activities and schedules, and it is hard. And I try to have grace for myself and grace for my friends, and so that we can weather this storm. And boy, when those kids graduate from high school, we can go away for a long weekend at the spa. But it is important. And it's important to be intentional about that because it doesn't just happen. I don't think great friendships that last 40 years, that's why I love working with seniors, because I can look at the ones, I'm like, yeah, I want to be like that kind of senior. I don't want to be like that kind of senior. I want to be like them. Those 40-year friendships don't just happen. Right?
No.
I have a woman who works for me and she is in her 70s and she's been in a book club for 40 years.
Oh my
Isn't that
gosh.
amazing?
She's my hero.
Oh.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Yes, no, it doesn't. I appreciate you bringing up that men struggle to have those deeper relationships. Again, that's a social, issue there too. A cultural social issue. And my husband's best friend turned 40 earlier this year. And man, we had to pay a lot of money to have an overnight babysitter for 3 nights, a lot of money for a plane ticket. And it was a big effort. And you know what? We were like, we got to go because that relationship is so important that we make those efforts because it doesn't just happen. I get together with, this reminds me, I need to send an email. I get together with 15, this is crazy, 15 girls from college every year. We were in an a cappella group together.
Oh, nice. I was going to say sorority girl, but cute. That's
well, I also have some sorority friends that I'm still good friends with, but this a cappella group, and we've decided that every year we're going to do a retreat. And we go to like wineries or whatever we do. And we have like 1,000 children between us at this point. And it is so encouraging. Every year between 10 and 14, 15 girls make it to the retreat. And I need to send the email out because I often am the one that kind of initiates, hey, which weekend works for you next year? Got to do that. But yeah, and it doesn't happen easily. It takes effort, And so anyways, what a fun way to end this episode is talking about friendships because that applies to all of us and it gives us something to look forward to. I cannot wait to be old and gray with my longtime best friends. I have one that I've been best friends with since we were 8 years old. And you better believe we're going to pick the same retirement community. We have not lived in the same state in almost 20 years, but we love each other and we're going to retire in the same place. So anyways, Jeannine, this has been the best. I wouldn't be surprised. Don't be shocked if in a couple months you hear from me and I'm like, you got to come back. We got to do another one.
Yeah.
And for that reason, for the sake of time, I'm going to just skip right on to where can everyone learn more about your work? Can you tell us about that?
One-stop shop, go to easyrightsizing.com. There's a whole bunch of free resources on there. There's videos, podcasts that I've been on, radio shows, free downloadable resources. There's blog posts. And then there's also links to the books that I've written and even an online course for older adult who's moving in the next 1 or 2 years. This online course walks them through start to finish over 3 hours of video content there. And then follow me, Easy Rightsizing, on socials too, Facebook and Instagram.
Unbelievable. This is the greatest service ever. I'm so excited to tell all my friends and their parents about it. Yay. Thank you for coming on and sharing your wealth of practical knowledge and wisdom and all of it. I'm just obsessed. So thank you a million times over.
Thank you.
You just listened to an episode of Paring Down with me, Shannon Leyko. If you enjoyed the show, it would mean the world if you can leave a review wherever you listen and share this episode with a friend. Those reviews really are what keeps a podcast on its feet for the long haul, and I will read every single one with a huge smile on my face. So thank you ahead of time. If you're watching on YouTube, don't forget to hit subscribe. Also, be sure to follow along on Instagram at paring_down, where I offer lots of tips and inspiration for paring down, along with what's new here on the podcast. Till next time.